Hello and welcome. This is Corey from Bach Scholar. I want to play you the first strain of my own arrangement of Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, which comes from Cantata number 147. And then after this, I'm going to discuss a little about tempo, and I'm going to go into a very long analysis of Cantata number 147. But before I do that, just sit back and listen, and then we'll have a discussion. Isn't that beautiful? You know what I did with this? I transposed it into the key of D flat major. If you know this piece, it's in the key of G major. G major, D flat. It's a very long ways away from the original key. So I took it down, I make it sound lower, I slowed it way down. It's very romantic sounding. It gets even more romantic in the middle. The purpose of this video is not to advertise my arrangement of Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, although you are welcome to purchase this and play it from my Bach Scholar website. The purpose is not, it's not about my arrangement, it's about the issue of tempo. When we hear this played by pianists, like I just played it, you'll often hear it slow, you'll often hear it a little faster, you'll often hear it maybe even a little faster. And then if you listen to cantata performances, where it actually came from by leading performance groups like the J.S. Bach Foundation, also known as the Bach Stiftung, and also the Netherlands Bach Society. These are two top performing groups now. I'm sure if you listen to Bach's cantatas, I'm sure you've viewed many of their performances on YouTube. They're two just top performing groups that I'm going to discuss later in this video. I'm going to compare their two performances of this cantata, and I'm going to, as a musical detective, I'm going to actually determine the tempo that Bach wanted for Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. Believe it or not, I can actually do that. It's possible to determine the exact tempo that Bach had in mind. How is that possible? Well, it's possible by analyzing the large-scale structure, the whole structure of Bach's cantata and how Bach organized his cantata. In my forthcoming book, Tempo and Duration in the Music of Bach, which I've been working on, by the way, for 33 years, in my forthcoming book, I will discuss and I will analyze all of Bach's cantatas. And I will show that similar things that you will see in this cantata, similar things happen in virtually every other cantata that Bach wrote. Bach was a musical architect who designed his cantatas as like rooms in a house. Each of the arias and choruses are like rooms in a house, and Bach wanted them a certain length in terms of the number of measures and the amount of time that it took to perform, like 4 minutes or 6 minutes. So by playing musical detective, we can actually determine how many minutes and seconds Bach wanted Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring to last. Can you believe that? This is actually true. It sounds too good to be true, but it's not. This is actually true. I'm telling you, it's possible to determine the minutes and the seconds long that Bach intended Jesu, joy of man's desiring. And this is possible only by close analysis of Cantata 147, and especially with help from two of our friends, our two great performing groups who are going to help us with our analysis. So without any further ado, get your coffee and tea, sit back. This is a fairly lengthy video. We're going to delve into an analysis on a screen view on my computer of Bach's Cantata number 147, and we're going to analyze and compare and contrast the two performances of the J.S. Bach Foundation and the Netherlands Bach Society. So without any further ado, let's delve into the analysis. Before we examine the recordings, I'm going to go over this tempo table first, then we're going to go over the table for the cantata here. And then I have a special table here for the performances that we're going to analyze here from our two performing groups. So this is just a sort of a preview of what this video is about. So you see a matrix of whole numbers here. These are assumed from the beginning to be perfect tempos. It's assumed that a perfect tempo is that which is a whole number or an integer or a non-fractional value. So when you create a matrix like this is a particular matrix that is created with all whole numbers. It is a special matrix because each of these rows gets faster while each of the columns regroups the fastest common note value into various groupings. So we have F, C, and V. That's what I refer to as the fastest common note value. So if you have one note moving at 144 beats per minute, divided into 2, you get 72, divided into 3s, you get 48, so forth and so on. And you can see that these rows systematically increase in speed to where each one increases roughly 10 or so percent. And you can see that it encompasses virtually all of the tempo levels that Bach and most composers actually worked with during the Baroque period. Everything from very slow grave to presto. And so I'll go over this table more, but basically this table is an assumption from the beginning. I use it as an axiom. I'm not here to prove these tempos. I'm here just simply to use these numbers as tempos. And we're going to apply these to Bach's music, and we're going to see what happens. So I believe that Bach used these numbers for his tempos. He may not have arranged a matrix exactly like this, but he was fully aware and fully cognizant of his main tempos and how they relate to each other, even though he didn't have a metronome. And I'll show you that. As we go through our analysis, that will become more clear as we go through this analysis. And if you look at more cantata tables, you'll realize that, wow, this probably isn't a coincidence. This is really planned. And this is really astonishing what Bach did, I think. So let's look at cantata number 147 now. Heart and Mouth and Deed and Life is sort of the translation in English, composed in 1723. It consists of 2 parts and 10 movements. The main movements, or the major movements, are movements 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Actually, out of these 10 movements, really only 2 what I call minor movements, or not arias or important choruses, are movements 2 and 4. So we're not going to pay very much attention to movements 2 and 4. They're recitatives. Not that recitatives aren't important. They are textually, with Bach. But I don't think that Bach cared so much about when he was planning, lengths of movements. The recitatives were sort of passageways. In other words, I thought of a good analogy. Think of a cantata like this as being a house, And think of a pretty large house, and there's 10, or let's say there's 8 major rooms in the house, and there's 2 major passageways. Well, that's a poorly designed house. There should probably be more passageways, but you see what I mean. So uh, I view this as being a house. This is an architectural design, and the numbers of measures that Bach writes, which is in this column here, the number of measures that Bach writes is analogous to the length or the size of the room. You know, the 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 volume of the room, or what, however they would say it in architectural terms. You know, the length of one side and then the length of the other side. You know, so these measure numbers that Bach chose here are analogous to those things. Now, the next task here is to assign a tempo from our matrix of perfect tempos here, and to assign a tempo for each of the movements that seems appropriate for that style. You may have to experiment a little bit, listen to several recordings, really think about it a while, and let it sink in. Let me emphasize that I've been doing this kind of analysis for over 30 years, and so I've been thinking about this a lot. And actually, my analysis of this cantata and a few other cantatas have changed over the years. I'm having some slightly different opinions on how long the movements should be, but nevertheless, they're still all equal, and even equal more in this particular analysis than they were in previous analyses that I did. Well, let me get down to the nuts and bolts here. Do you see that the first movement is fast? The first movement is a very lively movement. I'm assigning the tempo 96 beats per minute. We'll skip this recitative. The third movement, an alto aria, 108 measures of 3/4 time. I'm assigning the tempo 72. And the fifth movement here, soprano aria, it's in 4/4 time, 50 measures. I'm assigning the measure 48 beats per minute. These are pretty close to what's usually done, these tempos. So this is nothing radical or anything. You know, I'm not proposing any radical theories that everything is played too slow or fast or something like that. No, actually, performers come very close to these tempos, and I'll show you that when we get to our table. Next, we have measures movement 7 here with the tenor and aria, 3/4 time, 64 measures, and I assign the measure 64. And let me clarify this one here. If you watched my last video, I made an emphasis on, I emphasized this table and this column of 4s right here. So generally speaking, if you have a 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, any kind of normal time signature like that, and you have 4 subdivisions of a beat, in other words, 16th notes like in a 4/4 time, you're going to look at this column. However, if they were triplets, if you have a beat with triplets, you need to look in this column here, because these are not always the same numbers. For example, this is why I'm bringing this up, because you can, okay, so for example here, 63 is a valid tempo for something in the 4s column here. However, 63 is not in the 3s column. If you have triplets, if you have 3 notes per beat, or triplets or something of that nature, one of the tempos must be 64, not 63. So 64 is unique for the 3s column. 64 is unique for here. 63 is unique for here. Otherwise, also 56 and 54 are different. So 56 is unique for 3s if you have triplets. 54 is if you have quadruplets. And if you have both, just choose one. But usually it's best to choose the one where that particular rhythmic structure prevails. And so I'm bringing this up because look at this tempo 64 here in the 3s column, or 64 also here. See in the 6s column, it's right here. Well, this movement here is consists of pretty much all triplet 16th notes, like fast triplets, like an eighth note that's divided into triplets. And so case, that particular case, because it's triplets, requires 64 and not 63. That's all I'm saying. It's not a big deal, but just technically, it has to be 64 and not 63. So I'm just bringing that up. So now measure 9 is a bass aria, 4/4 time, 58 measures. I'm assigning the tempo 84, and then the final chorale here, the very famous Jesu, joy of man's desiring, that famous chorale here, that's number 6 and number 10. And I'm assigning that tempo 96. It's a very fast tempo, but I'll explain why in a couple minutes. So now what you do is, after you have all these tempos, you have the appropriate tempos, you plug them in, you do the math, you do the calculations, and you come up with these durations here. So it turns out that Bach planned, or this tells me that Bach planned the first opening chorus here, movement 1, to last 4 minutes. I think he was aiming for 64 measures, but he's a human being, so he wrote 66 measures. And that creates a duration of just over 4 minutes, 4 minutes and 7 seconds to be exact. So we can round this off to 4. So whenever you hear a performance of the opening chorus of Cantata 147, the closer to 407, the better. So you need to listen to performances and see how close they get to 407. Now let's look at 3. Let's look at movement 3 here. It is an alto aria, 3/4 time, 108 measures, 72, a nice moderate tempo for this. If you do the math, it comes out to exactly 4 minutes. Exactly. So it looks like Bach was 2 measures off in the first movement. He hit the third movement exactly at 4, or exactly at 108 measures, which results in a duration of 4 minutes at the tempo of 72. Next is movement 5. It's a soprano aria, 4/4 time, 50 measures, tempo 48. If you calculate it out, it comes to just a little bit over 4 minutes, just like the first movement here. So it tells me that Bach was also about 2 measures off. I think he was aiming for 48 measures here in order to attain the duration of exactly 4 minutes. So you can see that the opening 3 main movements in part 1 are 4-minute durations here, or to be exact, a little over 4 minutes for movements 1 and 5, and exactly 4 minutes for movement 3. I don't think this is a coincidence. I think Bach planned this, and that's what I'm showing in this book, Tempo and Duration in the Music of Bach. Now, next, let's look at the famous chorale here, number 6, the Jesu, joy of man's desiring chorale that everyone knows, one of Bach's most famous pieces. It's been transcribed to piano and many instruments many times, but in context of this cantata, it is not a slow piece. It's actually a very lively chorale. It's a lively allegro style chorale. It's not andante. It's not slow and expressive. But it's okay to play slow and expressive piano arrangements. That's fine. But I'm just talking about in context with this cantata, in a historical context. It's not a slow piece, not a slow movement at all. But I think that it's easy to do it too fast as well. So we'll see what our performers do. Well, here's a very interesting thing. If you assign it the same tempo as the opening chorus, 96. So 96 results in a duration of virtually 4 minutes for the opening chorus. Well, if you keep that 96 beats per minute and apply it to the dotted quarter note, it's a relatively fast dotted quarter note. It's like a jig it's kind of a jig in 3/4 or 9/8 time. If you calculate that out, it comes to 241. 241. Well, if you study Bach's durations, and you'll know this is a very ubiquitous duration. This happens a lot. You'll see 240 a lot. And Bach will pair 240 with 4 all the time. This happens very frequently. This is really amazing because now this tells us that Bach wanted movements 1, 3, and 4 to be 4 minutes, and he wanted the chorale here, the famous chorale, to be, you know, to be in a 2-3 ratio to that, to be 240. And he also repeats this at the end. So this chorale at the end is simply that repeated. I remember years ago when I was analyzing this cantata for the first time, I think I had a slower tempo for the chorale and everything. But the thing that really leads me to believe it is 96, which leads to the duration of 240, is the ninth movement. If you look at the bass aria here in 4/4, 58 measures, it's a pretty lively aria, like an allegro style, 84 beats per minute. If you perform this at 84 beats per minute, it lasts 245. 245. It's just a little off from 240. So you can see that this indicates that Bach was probably aiming for two fewer measures, 56 measures, so that it would last 240, so it would be in line with the final chorale at 240 as well. So these two are a pair right there. Not measures. I keep saying measures. Movements 9 and 10 are equal in duration. See, they both last 240 or something very close to that. And that only leaves two more movements because Bach has 1, 3, and 5, and 6 already unified. He has 9 and 10 unified at 240, the same duration. So he has, now summarizing so far, he has 3 durations of 4 minutes, and then he has 3 more durations of 240, which is 2/3 of 4 minutes. Very common for Bach to do this sort of thing. Now there's only 2 movements left over. There's movement 7 and there's movement 8. 7 is a tenor aria, 8 is a recitative, but it's not a minor movement. It's actually one of the major movements because it's longer and it fits in to the duration plan here. So if you assign this tenor aria 64, as I went over before, 63 is also good, but just technically it should be 64 because it comes out of that either triplet or sextuplet column. So at a tempo of 64 or 63, anything close to that, it's going to come to 3 minutes. In fact, 64 comes to 3 minutes exactly. So then this recitative here, 4/4 time, 27 measures. A very good tempo for it is 54 beats per minute, rather slow, but not too slow, like an andante. If you perform this recitative at 54 beats per minute with 27 measures, it lasts exactly 2 minutes. So you can see that Bach planned measures, I keep saying measures. So you can see that Bach planned movement 7 and 8 to have a 3/2 duration ratio, and he hit these right on the mark. 0% margin of error here. So to summarize cantata number 147, we have 3 durations of 4 minutes, 3 durations of 240, which is 2/3 of 4 minutes, and we have 2 durations, one of 3 minutes and one of 2 minutes. And then there are, like I said before, 2 minor movements, the recitatives, and movements 2 and 4, which we won't really discuss because I don't think those really fall into the plan. So this is very typical of what Bach did in his cantatas. If you're interested in this, you need to buy my book and look at all the other cantatas or the ones you're interested in, and you'll see similar relationships like this. It is absolutely astonishing and fascinating what Bach did. I call him a musical architect because what he did was he planned the actual lengths of his movements in terms of minutes and seconds, believe it or not, minutes and seconds. Now let's turn to our analysis of the performances of this. Now, the J.S. Bach Foundation in Germany also known as the Bach Stiftung. Uh, just a fabulous group of musicians and soloists and conductor. I use their performances frequently for my analyses, and I thank them for their high quality performances. And the Netherlands Bach Society, here the NBS, another absolutely first rate group, and they are at the top, just like the J.S. Bach Foundation. I consider these two groups to be, of course, the two top groups probably in the world right now performing Bach's cantatas. So they are to be really revered and respected. So I highly respect them. And when I criticize their tempos, it's nothing against them as as performers. I'm just going over the facts, the details. Okay, so getting that out of the way first. So let's look at what happens here. So we have the movements listed here as we went over in our analysis sheet table. And then we have the actual durations here. These are the actual durations, not the ideal durations. So the first movement here, 407. So it should last 407 or something very close to that. And let's see, the J.S. Bach Foundation gets 353. Very, very close. Actually, they're only a little bit off. That's all. But very, very close. Excellent performance. And then the Netherlands Bach Society here, 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Virtually perfect. Virtually perfect. They're only 3 seconds off. Nothing. I mean, that's excellent. So both of these groups do an excellent job with the opening chorus. However, the J.S. Bach Foundation just a tad fast. If you put their performance on 0.95x, that is 5% slower, you will get more of a tempo that Bach had in mind. You'll get more of a perfect tempo of 96. I think that they were a little over that. They were more like 100 or so. But the Netherlands Bach Society, perfect on that movement here in terms of tempo. We'll skip number 2, the recitative, but just as a note, look, according to the table, it should last about 124. Well, we got a 128 and a 150. So 128 pretty close, 150 pretty far, and that's not that important. But let's move to movement 3, alto aria. Bach achieves 4 minutes exactly. This is problematic here because the J.S. Bach Foundation gets 3 minutes and 8 seconds. It's almost a minute too fast, but I'm going to go over that in a few minutes and explain that. That's not bad. I'm just going to explain there's another interpretation for this aria. And then the Netherlands Bach Society, 3 minutes and 39 seconds. It should be 4 minutes. They're about 20 seconds off. So if you listen to their performance of this aria at 0.9x or 10% slower, you will get a duration of 4 minutes or very close to that. So that's more of what Bach had in mind. Now let's look at movement 5, aria soprano, 4 minutes and 10 seconds. So it should last as close to 4:10 as possible. And you see that the J.S. Bach Foundation, very good, 357, just shy of 4 minutes. Very good, but still just a tad fast. So if you put this performance on 0.95x, you'll get almost exactly 4:10, and it will be in line with more with the tempo that Bach had in mind, the ideal tempo. The Netherlands Bach Society, they do 4.5 minutes. Nice performance, but just a tad slow, actually. So J.S. Bach Foundation, a tad fast. NBS, a tad slow. They're about 10% too slow. So if you put their performance of this soprano aria on 1.1x and listen to it, it will get it about to 4:10. Or I don't know, it might be 1.05x. You might want to try that too. Either 5 or 10% too slow. I didn't really calculate it exactly. Now let's look at the chorale. 241. 241, or Bach wanted 240, but I guess technically it's 241 exactly. So let's see what the J.S. Bach Foundation does. 223. Wow, that's really fast. That's fast. That's like that really rips. Now let's see what the what Netherlands Bach Society does. 234. So they get a little slower than the J.S. Bach Foundation. They're in relative agreement, but it's still a little fast. So you can see if you put the J.S. Bach Foundation's recording at 0.9x, it will reach 241, or very, very close to that. And if you put the Netherlands Bach Society recording at 0.95x, 5% slower, then they will achieve 241. So they were very close here, both of them, but they were both a little fast. J.S. Bach Foundation, 10%, about 10% too fast, and the Netherlands Bach Society about 5% too fast. So let's go on to part 2. So movement 7, a tenor aria, 3 minutes duration. Bach hit 3 minutes exactly. And J.S. Bach Foundation, 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Absolutely great. You can hardly do any better than that. Perfect tempo for the J.S. Bach Foundation for that. Netherlands Bach Society, 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Just a little slow, but great performance nevertheless. A little slow. But if you want to listen to this more at, I guess, Bach's ideal tempo, you need to speed this up by about 5%. So JSBF got it perfect, NBS just 5% too fast. This is an amazing one here. Movement 8, the alto recitative, which is one of the major movements, I think. Bach achieved 2 minutes exactly. The J.S. Bach Foundation, 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Amazing. Right on target. Perfect tempo. And then the NBS, look at this. They also do 202. Perfect tempo. So number 8 is great for everyone. Perfect tempo. And that supports my theory that that particular movement should be 54 beats per minute, which is one of Bach's main sort of more andante tempos. So let's move on to movement 9, a bass aria. The actual duration is 245 if done at the correct tempo. 245, of course, we know that Bach was aiming for 240, but he overshot his ideal number of measures by a couple. So we're going to say as close to 245 as possible for that. What does the J.S. Bach Foundation do? Well, 240. They're only 5 seconds fast. It's virtually perfect. So we have another perfect one here from J.S. Bach Foundation, perfect tempo. And then the Netherlands Bach Society, even more perfect. Look, 245. They hit it exactly. Amazing. So there's really no conflict whatsoever in movement 7, movement 8, movement 9. Everyone's in agreement, including my analytical table. To conclude, you can see that our 2 performing groups here get very high ratings. I see nothing really more than about 10% off from Bach's ideal tempo. Often they're 5% or within 5% margin of error, which is very good. So I have nothing bad to say about our superlative performing groups, but I just wanted to bring this table up just to bring it to your attention that Bach did intend certain durations for his movements of his cantatas, and this one I thought would be really exciting to look at, and I hope you got something out of this. Stay tuned for more videos like this where I will analyze more of Bach's works.